Good evening. My name is Bob Liff, and this is the CUNY Forum, a monthly town meeting that brings prominent New Yorkers together with faculty and students of the Edward T. Rogowsky Internship Program in Government and Public Affairs. January 1st will see an entirely new government sworn in at City Hall as the 1993 term limits law approved by voters takes full effect. There will be a new mayor, a new public advocate, a new comptroller, and 38 of the 51 city council members will be rookies. This is a situation fraught with opportunity and with danger, as the newcomers must immediately wrestle with the grim fiscal realities left in the wake of the September 11th attack on the World Trade Center. Along with the towers, more than 100,000 jobs have disappeared. Tax receipts, which already were showing signs of weakness before the attack, are expected to plummet, and that could leave the city with a potential budget gap that's been estimated as high as $6 billion in coming years. Expenditures on capital projects, social service programs, city university campuses, and even employees' paychecks will be considered in a framework where cutbacks and retrenchment will be the watchwords, replacing the optimism and growth of the 1990s. We are joined tonight by four people who will sit on that new city council, while three of the four are newcomers. All bring long resumes of political and civic activism to the table. Bill Perkins, who represents Central Harlem, East Harlem, and the Upper West Side of Manhattan, is a returning member who is poised to enter the leadership for the next 2 years. David Weprin, newly elected to represent Queens Village and other parts of Eastern Queens, learned his politics in part from his late father, who was a state assembly speaker. Gale Brewer, who represents Manhattan's West Side, is a veteran civic activist who is working with a group of newcomers to try and loosen up the rules in a body that traditionally has been under the iron rule of the speaker. And Yvette Clarke, elected from Flatbush, is also from a trailblazing family, following her mother in representing a district at the heart of Brooklyn's Caribbean immigrant community. Mr. Perkins, let me begin with you as the veteran on the panel. The most important new vote that the council will likely make will be its first, to choose a new speaker. You've been mentioned among the possible candidates. Mr. Weprin is also a possible candidate. How has the job changed in the aftermath of the attacks of September 11th?
Well, I think the job has changed not simply in the aftermath of September 11th. I think the job has changed in terms of the September 11th by virtue of the kind of economic and fiscal crises that have been compounded by what has happened on September 11th. However, I think and therefore the focus of the speaker will be significantly different than the past speaker, because we'll be looking at a much more stringent budget situation as opposed to surpluses, as opposed to enhancements in terms of our budget allocations. We'll be probably looking at I'm sorry to say budget cuts or some other kind of very serious budget balancing responsibilities. But then I think more significant than that in terms of the role of the speaker and the focus of the speaker has been the fact of term limits, and that there are 38 new members coming in, 38 new dynamic members that are coming in that have come in with a mantra for change. And I think that mantra, that call for change, particularly in terms of the term democratization, I think will significantly make a difference in terms of how the speaker will function, not in this immediate term, but even more so in the longer term.
Mrs. Brewer, let me turn to you. You've been part of that group of newcomers, trying to democratize the council, if you will. How, in part to empower chairmen and chairwomen. How is that going to work when you have a new mayor on the other side of City Hall, and kind of diffusing the power from the speaker, does that weaken you in trying to deal with the other side of City Hall?
I don't think so. I think that a part is as strong, a whole is as strong as its parts. And I think that this group, Yvette has been a long-time member, David has joined recently, and what we're trying to accomplish is, I think, threefold. First of all, to give, yes, the speaker control, but more importantly, to make sure that the committees have some strength. In other words, the committee should have some say, the committee chair, about who the staffing is, and have say about the policy of how that committee will operate. This is how it's done in Congress. When you hear about Congress, you hear not just about who the speaker is, but you know, for instance, who's involved with Ways and Means or Appropriations, and you know that that committee is working for you as the constituent. That's what we would like to do. So the city as a whole knows that the council is working for them in these very challenging times. The second thing we're trying to do is provide some sunshine, I think, in the speaker's race. We don't have a position on who should be speaker. People have different suggestions, but we do have the opportunity to come together, as we did recently, and have speaker forum, so that the speakers who are running are able to present their views for their speakership. And we're going to do that in the beginning of December for the whole world, so that anybody in the audience tonight is welcome to join us to see what the vision of an individual speaker candidate is. So I think in the end we'll have a stronger speaker, we'll have a stronger council, and we'll be able to counter the mayor when necessary, but at the same time work with them to come up with a better city.
Mr. Weprin, it wasn't that long ago that Queens was the most powerful county in the state, if not the country. You had Governor Cuomo, you had your father as the Assembly Speaker, you had Peter Vallone as the Council Speaker. Now you have 14 newcomers. Queens was wiped out of the term limits. How do you rebuild power?
Well, with the selection of the new Speaker, some people are saying that Queens may be the most united delegation, and we do have 14 members, 13 Democrats, 1 Republican, and I think the thought process is if we can come together and support one particular person, whether that be a freshman or an incoming member, that we can have strength as a delegation. But I think power in the new city council will be totally different, because there's no seniority system. Freshmen can play as important a role and are immediately senior members, and in some ways people may look at a freshman as more powerful because, or more important, because they can serve for 8 years as opposed to having only a couple of years left. So I mean, you can look at it from that point of view as well.
Ms. Clarke, corollary to that question is how important is the borough, is the borough consciousness? Is Brooklyn going to stay together in crafting legislation, or does it kind of cross other kinds of lines?
I think that there will always be a united interest within the borough, but I think that there's also some indications that there are citywide issues that will impact based on recession, based on September 11th, concerns that are citywide that we have a unique opportunity to really impact on as a legislative body. So I think we're going to see the strengthening of priorities among borough delegations, but also some comparative analysis looking at what's taking place citywide.
Let's go. Rather than dealing with substance, let's just deal with the raw politics of getting elected speaker first. Unlike elections where you have 150,000 people you represent, or the city has 8 million people, this is a vote of 51 people. And arguably it's the most important vote. It's going to be your first vote. It's the most important vote you're going to cast as a member of the council. Mr. Weprin alluded to the fact that Councilman Perkins and most of the other returning people only have 2 years to serve because of a little bit of the insanity of the term limits law, the way it's written, because we're going to have a redistricting period and then a redistricting election. Does it matter if it's a 2-year or an 8-year speaker? Let me start with you.
Well, I think it matters who is the speaker, and obviously I see myself as the best person for that job. So in that respect, a 2-year person or a 4-year person doesn't matter. In all seriousness, I think there's a significant advantage that an incumbent council member has over someone that's just coming in. I don't want to take anything away from any of the newcomers, so to speak. Some have a great deal of legislative experience within this particular body and in many other ways, and clearly their commitment and their vision is very, very important in terms of what they can get done, and clearly the unity of the body will determine the strength of the speaker, and some of the reforms that are being proposed, I think, are meant to provide that kind of unity, that kind of strength. So while a 2-year speaker may know where the bathroom is a little bit sooner than someone coming in for the 4-year term, I think what we do as a body will determine the strength of the speaker more important than anything else. So I obviously have a prejudice in this regard, so I put that out there to be so everybody's clear. I'm the best person for the job.
Just to go over to Mr. Weprin as the other speaker candidate. And by the way, I mean the names that have been mentioned certainly go beyond the two people sitting here. Angel Rodriguez from Sunset Park in Brooklyn probably has the most votes at this
There's
point.
no need for you to give equal time.
Al,
We're talking about raw politics.
but I'm the sage at the center. You have Al Van of Bedford-Stuyvesant. You have Phil Reed from East Harlem.
Right.
You have Bill de Blasio has been mentioned from Park Slope. Gifford Miller from the east side of Manhattan has been mentioned.
Tony Avella.
And Melinda Katz.
And Melinda Katz from Queens. I hadn't heard Tony Avella being mentioned. Yeah. So why don't you take the other side of the 2-year, 8-year argument, if you haven't, if you disagree with that.
I have mixed feelings. I think there are arguments for having an incumbent coming back and supporting an incumbent who has been part of the process, has been part of the body. At the same time, there is a strong argument for a newcomer in light of the fact that you're going to have 38 out of 51 new members. That is going to be the significant majority of the council, and there is a potential to solidify behind a leadership team for a more extended period of time and continuity in that regard. So I think there are pros and cons to both. I don't think the jury is out yet, but at the same time, I am a candidate, but I'm trying to be objective here, and there are definitely pros and cons to both arguments.
Ms. Clarke, take this 2-year or 8-year argument.
I've looked at it very closely, and it's something that's worthy of further examination. What I think we've been able to do through the Fresh Democracy Council is to take a look at the pros and cons and sort of bring it to a head in terms of the strength of the leadership. When you're talking about a 2-year speakership, essentially it's sort of a transitional piece for our body, because the fresh or newcomers will be basically incumbent at the point at which a new speaker would be elected. That may be good in the sense that it gives us an opportunity as a body to gel and sort of work with some of the reforms, some of the things that we're looking at in terms of strengthening the legislative body. On the other hand, a 4-year person will provide a certain level of continuity and growth in what we expect to be a dynamic environment, a strengthened environment, and so again, it's kind of a hard thing to nail down right now. We have to look at the qualifications of the individuals. We have to look at really who has vested themselves in strengthening the body, and that can be someone who's on their way out or someone who's on their way up, depending on how you want to look at it.
I agree with Yvette. I think that it was interesting listening to the speakers speak the other night, and it will be even more interesting in a larger forum with more diverse questions. You always have a sense of how you know the person. You've had some interaction. I've been in government for 30-some years, so I've had a lot of contact with some of the people who are running, and some people are new acquaintances. And when you actually see somebody say, okay, this is my legislative agenda, this is how I'd like to accomplish it, that's very different than an informal discussion. So I think that, I have to say, I don't think the 2 or the 4-year issue is as much as the person's philosophy, some person's experience, both in the job currently or on the outside, and how do they perceive in this very challenging time that they can do 2 things: work with a brand new body, with a brand new mayor, and at the same time accomplish something. All of us can get something done in 2 years if we want to. I mean, Giuliani did what he perceived a success in terms of crime reduction. I would like to do the same on housing and education, even in these challenging times. So I want to know, how does a speaker feel that he or she can, in fact, Yvette could run, whatever. How can he or she
or Gale
accomplish, some form of I call it a campaign to accomplish our goals? What are the ways in which this can happen?
Well, I do want to announce that I am not a candidate. There were 51 members. There were 51 members in the council. There were 37 Democrats. There were only 4 Republicans. We've gone from
47.
40. I'm sorry, 40. There were only 4 Republicans. There were 47 Democrats. Bloomberg is at least nominally a Republican. We just went through 8 years of a Republican mayor. A, does it matter that he is a Republican? And B, can you see the Republican members in the council playing any decisive role in the picking of the speaker?
I think it remains to be seen. We're all basically on a new frontier here. Certainly, Michael Bloomberg ran on the Republican line. He's newly Republican, and so there's some indications that perhaps he's not as entrenched in a philosophy that is strictly Republican. So given that fact, I think many of us are looking at keeping at least our minds open and looking at what his initial actions will be before you pass judgment. I think, it bodes best for the city of New York at this time that we not go in with a preconceived notion of an adversary before it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, Bob, you raised an interesting question about the Republicans playing a role, because that's one of the issues that's come up at the Fresh Democracy Council meetings. And Oliver Coppell, who's a former assemblyman, a former attorney general, was the strongest advocate.
And a new council member from
and a
the
new
Bronx.
council member-elect from the Bronx. And he was one of the strongest advocates that the Republicans should not play a role, that traditionally in Albany, the way it's worked is the majority of the Democratic conference is the candidate of the conference, and they all unanimously endorse the one who has the majority vote. So instead of needing 26 votes, the argument is that it should only take 24 votes, and if there's a split in the conference and a vote of 24 to 23, the 23 should support the 24 and get behind that one candidate, and the Republicans should not play a role. That is a strong argument, and I'm leaning in favor of that, because when you only have 4 Republicans in a body, it seems almost absurd that 47 members of the majority party need to rely on 4 members of the minority party to elect the leader of the majority party. So
Except that, of course, arithmetic is what's in play here. I mean, you have to reach the 26 votes before you can tackle any of the great issues of the day. I mean, you have to reach those. Do you have any thoughts on this Republican question?
Well, I think that I worked 4 years in the mayor's office in the Democratic administration, in the Dinkins administration, and then obviously it was still the Democratic city council. I don't think it's so much a Republican-Democratic issue, is that no matter who's mayor needs a challenge.
No, but the question is about the Republicans within the council.
I
helping to pick the
agree with
speaker.
David. I mean, I thought about this. It came up first from Oliver Coppell, and I do agree that it would make sense for the Democratic caucus to act like a Democratic caucus. And we're researching now to see, I think it's just tradition that in fact these, I was there during the days when Susan Molinari was a minority of 1 in the city council, and then it went up to 7, I think, at its height. So I would agree with Oliver Coppell and with David and others that we should have a Democratic caucus. A Democrat should elect the speaker.
Bill, I assume you agree with that.
I agree with it. I don't believe in nonpartisan elections. I'm very partisan, and I think that the Democratic Party should be different than the Republican Party, and the politics of those 2 different parties should be separated.
yeah, I don't think the Democrats are playing a role in the election of the minority leader, so why should the Republicans play a role in the election of the majority leader or the speaker?
Actually, who gets to be minority leader among those 4 people is a very interesting. It's going to be a very.
They should
interesting
require
selection.
26 votes too, and then we'll be able to help them decide.
Because of the economy, because of the budget hits that the city's going to take. I assume that you're all going to be fully supportive of all of CUNY's budget requests.
Absolutely.
But
Particularly the community colleges.
which the city directly
Yes,
funds,
exactly.
as opposed to the state funding
That's
the
right.
four-year colleges.
Right.
Who's gonna take a hit in this in the budget difficulties you were talking
Well,
about?
right now everybody's taking a hit in the sense that the mayor's calling for a 15% reserve on everybody's budget, 2.5 for the Board of Ed and for the police and the fire department, and we're hoping that we can do the same thing to some extent for CUNY in terms of moderating the hit that they've received. Exactly how that hit will translate in terms of very specific services and programs, the mayor has not yet revealed.
But I mean, in the negotiations, since the council has a lot
There's
of
no
budget power
negotiations
now.
going on right now. That's the problem. In order for us to negotiate it, he has to put down a budget modification. He hasn't done that. So we're not sure when he's going to do that. He claims that he's going to do it, but it may be that he may leave it for January. But right now, there's no negotiations because he's basically called for a reserve fund of this money and from some point executive order perspective. So
It's very unusual because usually there's always been a November mod, to the best of my
right,
knowledge.
there's usually a November motto, even if it's a little bit late.
Right.
It's always expected.
Always. And
So this is a very unusual time. I suspect that he has not put it out there because he knows that as soon as it hits the table, all of our people are going to be calling us to fight to prevent them from cutting CUNY, to prevent them from cutting all the other programs that will be targeted. He doesn't want people to see exactly where the hit is being taken.
To what degree does the council have to be unified in trying to stand up against Giuliani or against Bloomberg if Bloomberg tries to carry out these things? And do these divisions over the speakership, which are, because you have so many multiple candidates now, it's such a, you know, I mean, the last fight in which Peter Vallone was elected, you basically had two candidates, and you had, you know, one Manhattan candidate who went against his borough and made Peter Vallone speaker in 1986.
The council will be a very unified body, probably more unified than it has been at any other time. There's always tendencies for fractiousness on a variety of reasons, whether it's borough politics, ethnic politics, whatever the case may be. From my perspective, whether I'm the speaker or not, I believe it's going to be a very unified body, unless, of course, the speaker turns out to be a flunky for the mayor. And then it will be a body in which there will be some significant opposition. I think that the group that's coming in now has evolved, from my objective point of view, into a fairly cohesive seeking group. Despite borough politics, despite leadership politics, and other tendencies towards fractiousness. So I'm very comfortable that it's going to be a very unified body. I think there's a focus on the fact that we're on somewhat of a crisis period, and we want to see if we can get through it. But it, again, depends upon whether or not people recognize that there is a difference between the city council as a legislative body and the role that it plays, and the speaker in that regard, versus the mayor, that will be playing a different role from the perspective of the executive.
Yeah, I think it's a very sophisticated group coming in the terms of maturity and intelligence. I didn't know all of the members, and I have been so impressed. People in our group in the Fresh Democracy Council take on responsibility, follow up. We've had consistent meetings, consistent communication. Very little, if any, division, so that I think the speaker issue, which could in fact divide people, is not doing that. I think people are very aware of the budget, challenges, and they are trying in their own mind to figure out about, the city as a whole. It's not even, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a parochial fight, which is what you can really get into.
Let me, since you're trying to avoid division, allow me to try to introduce something. There hasn't been a speaker for Manhattan in my lifetime. I mean, or at least my political memory. You go to Tom Cute and Peter Vallone, you're talking about 35 years or something. Should there not be a Manhattan speaker?
I don't think it matters what county the person is from. I think
I think it always has mattered, though, in the council.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe historically, but I think that these are new times, and I think you're dealing with individuals. I'd like to address the point you raised about does the open democratic process that we're going through in the Fresh Democracy Council and some of the openness, does that weaken the position of the speaker vis-a-vis the new mayor? I think that was what you were getting at. I think it's on the contrary. I think what it does is it unites the conference. What's happened often, and I can speak from the Albany model because I know you had mentioned about my father serving as speaker. He followed three very powerful speakers, all from Brooklyn. He was one of the first from Queens. And his philosophy was basically to go to the Democratic Conference first before he negotiated with the governor and the majority leader and got a consensus from the Democratic Conference and then went to negotiate, as opposed to some of his predecessors who used to negotiate with the governor and the majority leader and then try to sell it to the conference, to the Democratic Conference, and then often they'd have to go back to the negotiating table and make some changes. I think the fact that you take a consensus of your members and you kind of do it together doesn't weaken you, it empowers you because you can speak for the entire body with legitimacy, and that goes in with negotiation with the mayor in this case.
See, Bob, we all work together.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've come together in a real practical way, looking at what the task is that we have ahead of us. And it's very unique process that we're going through, and I think we're taking our job very seriously.
Except in the kind of backroom meetings, if you will. That's that. I mean that the sound is kind of kind of sleazy as the former connotations, because people can't even smoke in the back rooms anymore. I mean, Brooklyn and Queens, the Brooklyn members and the Queens members, including the Brooklyn Democratic leader and the Queens Democratic leader, have been talking about whether Brooklyn and Queens can unite behind the candidate. So, I mean, with all this unity, you'd still have some kind of borough raw politics. Again, we're not talking about, we're talking about 26 votes out of 51. We're talking about simple arithmetic. We're not talking about, vast. We're not, nobody's going to run TV ads to get elected speaker, unless it's really a local TV station.
You didn't see my commercials?
Well, I think, you brought in a really good point about the borough delegations, county leaderships, and things of that nature. Our Fresh Democracy Council was an outgrowth of sort of a distaste for that sort of organizing mechanism. We decided that we needed to meet one another, see what we were about, look at what our goals, and I know it seems mushy and you'd rather have the back door, but it provides a counterbalance, and there needs to be that type of dialogue, because not everyone is comfortable with that sort of
But it does something else,
approach.
Bob, which I've never seen before. Even in Manhattan, where we don't have that kind of county strength. What it did do, what the Fresh Democracy Council does, is it gives us the ability to go back to our delegation, because we meet as a delegation in the borough, and reiterate the strength that we get from the Fresh Democracy Council. I've never seen that happen before, and it's a whole new perspective. Previously, in the other organizations that I've been part of, you stick in your delegation or you stick in your club or whatever it is, and you don't have the vibrancy that comes from a more interrelated group.
I agree with most of what's been said. I think that the county politics is still going to play into this. And to what extent, I can't honestly say. One of the things that's clear is that there are a lot more actors involved than simply the county organizations. Conceivably, Brooklyn and Queens in the old days could simply get together and divide up the pie, because together they control 30.
Except when Brooklyn and Queens had opposing candidates.
Except when they had opposing candidates, exactly.
Which happened the last time.
Which happened the last time, and so on. And even in the last time, by the way, the county dictate was not all that ruled, because Manhattan was in play at that time, and we still didn't have a strong county leadership type of thing going on. But there's laborers involved now in terms of some concerns that they want to put on the table, and some choices that they'd like to see emerge. And as far as this leadership is concerned, you have other advocacy type groups that are sort of on the fringes trying to be a part of it. So the whole process has gotten much more participatory from a variety of other interests, each of whom is trying to make sure that whatever ultimately happens is representative of I guess, the best that the city has to offer.
Before we go to questions, let me just ask two quick questions, which are not quick questions, but I'll ask for quick answers, which is, to what degree ethnicity becomes a factor in the selection? This is
or gender.
This is or gender. This is a city with 3 men in the top citywide officials. It's also a city in which everybody is a statistical minority.
There's one woman.
That's right.
I'm sorry.
2 men and 1 woman.
And where you have less than 40%, about 40% of the population now is non-Hispanic white. How much of a factor is that? Briefly.
Well, realistically, ethnicity has always played a part in politics in New York City. Remember the 3 I's? Italy, Israel, and Ireland. I mean, we've always recognized differences
and now you have PR and Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico.
And you might wind up having to go to Africa, to make sure, or Caribbean, to make sure that the coalitions can be put together. So obviously, people in this city have always had, as a part of politics, recognizing the various differences and trying to put coalitions together that more or less balanced out those differences. And in this race, the idea of ethnicity has still played a part in it. Now, whether it will be the dominant part, well, that's still
Yeah,
to be
and
told.
I don't think you have to be a member of that ethnicity to represent that district. I think Marty Markowitz proved it in Brooklyn when he did so well in the African American community, and he represented an African American district. He was one of the only whites that consistently got elected, and with big black numbers. And I think it's a question of taking into consideration some of the constituencies and representing them well, more than actually looking like them as much.
I think we are looking at qualifications. We're looking at empowerment of the body, and to the extent that ethnicity or gender becomes an issue, it becomes an enhancement more than anything else. I know that in the FDC, we're looking at principles, we're looking at strength, we're looking at the strengthening of the body overall. I think there's no getting around the fact that we live in a very multicultural and very diverse city, and that certainly I think we've reached a point in which that acknowledgement has almost caused a meltdown in the Democratic Party. So I think the sensitivities are there. I think that at least from my interactions with my colleagues, we're not looking at that as an overriding factor. Somewhat what my colleague, Council Member Perkins, has stated, that will not be the dominant reason for selecting a speaker.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're looking for a speaker who has the qualifications and who's sensitive to the city as a whole, and who pledges to put together a team of people who represent the city as a whole. So that could include the quality, because there's a lot of quality to select from in terms of chairs or in terms of his or her cabinet, so to speak. So I think that there's you want to make sure there's a sensitivity there. There are fewer women in the city council. There are only going to be 12 women, and I think there are 14 or 15 or maybe more now. So I know Yvette and I are hopeful that women will also be part of this team.
If I don't go to questions, I'm going to get in trouble with my speaker. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Myrna Rodriguez. I'm from John Jay College. I wanted to know, historically or generally, most council people don't have a close personal relationship with their constituents, meaning like an office where, a kind of office where people could go and ask for help. And I wanted to know if the new freshmen or new people coming into council, would they have offices or be more involved within their constituencies?
I think that's a very telling statement that you made and question that you asked, because every council member is to have an office in their district. Now, whether they are in touch with their constituency is a whole nother issue. I think for the newly elected, and I speak for myself, but I'm sure my colleagues would share in that, our election year was very unique in the sense that because of term limits, it brought out unprecedented numbers of candidates. And that sort of assures us that we have leadership capabilities within our communities that perhaps heretofore folks were unaware of. As an astute politician would know that if you have 5 other people in your district who have revealed that they too are interested in providing leadership to your community, then it's important that you stay in contact with your constituency, you provide the services that they need, and that first and foremost they know where your office is located.
Yeah, actually, on that same line that Yvette brought out, because of term limits, most of us have been running for this office for 2 or 3 years, which is very unusual. And I think the local city council person, of all your elected officials, is the closest to the people, because we can't hide in Albany or Washington, or say we're in Albany and Washington, because we're in the city, everybody knows where we are, and I like to think that the local council person is probably the closest to the people as far as constituent service.
The other issue, of course, is that everybody here except for Mr. Perkins, who was term limited in 2003, has to run again in 2 years. That's number one. And number two, they're going to be running under different lines. One of the big fights that's going to go on now is how you cut up the city, and who gets what neighborhoods depending on how they vote, and who will be strengthened, who will be politically punished, who will be helped. So there's a lot of incentives for them to be much closer to the people they represent, because they're going to be worrying about.
I'm not quite sure where the question is coming from. I suspect that we're not talking about council members that are not visible in the neighborhood. I suspect that we're talking about the other elected officials who, by virtue of their job definition, are either in Albany or in Washington. Because most council members, even amongst my group and others, they tend to be very, very visible, almost to the point where the other electeds in the district are kind of like concerned about them getting more visibility than their jobs allow them to do so. So it could be that the particular questioner's council person has not let it be known where their district office is. But one of the remarkable things about the city council is that it is a grassroots, highly visible, highly accessible position in which the council member tends to be probably very well known by comparison. Now, there are some who have been invisible. There are some who were terrible. There are some who have brought some shame to this particular position. But generally speaking, council members are very, very visible.
Yeah, I think I just want to add there might be another aspect to it, though, those of us who are recently elected, and that's to be incredibly proactive with technology. I'm one of these people who has 6,000 names on my email list, and I'd be glad to add anybody's email who wishes. Because I feel very strongly that in addition to being visible in the community, there are other ways of communication, and I think that the Fresh Democracy Council is very committed to figuring out a way of being cyber contacted. Mm-hmm.
I would say that the rest of us also that are not members necessarily of that Fresh Democracy Council share the same point of view.
I got it.
We're the less fresh democracy council, I guess.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The unfresh.
We can make you an honorary member, Bill.
That's right. Reverend Brown.
Hello, my name is Bulai. I'm from Hunter College. My question is, what do you guys plan to do for the tuition changes for all the undocumented students that's going to take effect next semester?
Are you familiar with this issue?
Yes. I'm extremely
the tuition change for
concerned,
undocumented.
Concerned
Explain the issue.
As you may know, there are students within the CUNY system who came to this country either when they were younger or have progressed through the school system and have never been documented as
and they will have to pay
as residents. Right. What they would have to pay is the international rate, like if you were an exchange student rate to attend CUNY. I think that we're going to really have to look at that policy very quickly in short order. I think that it can be very detrimental and destabilizing to many communities where you have recent immigrants to the city of New York, and I would really advise against such a drastic move. For many of our communities, this has been a traditional way in which we're able to bring some upward mobility to our communities, and certainly education is key to now bring and impose this type of cost on that segment of the student body. I think does a disservice not only to our educational system but to our communities on a whole. So that's an issue that we will be watching, and I will be advocating among my colleagues to address.
Your district is one of the most heavily immigrant communities,
That's
which I assume would include a larger number.
That's right.
Proportionally.
Yeah, actually, along the lines of immigrants, we're all children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of immigrants.
That's right.
And one of the reasons my father was able to succeed in his career was that he went to the City University, and it was free tuition at the time. And his parents could not have afforded to send him to a private school, so he was able to go up through the system, in this case Brooklyn College. But that's the beauty of the system, and I think it's very important that immigrants and new immigrants become part of the system, and I would strongly support Yvette's position.
Let me just say, I want to acknowledge that the questioner is an intern of mine, is doing a wonderful job, and the people from Hunter should be proud. But the last time we were in a situation like this, the question of tuition came up, and at that time, in the late 70s, is when we lost free tuition at the City University system. I bring that up because it's the kind of time when a lot of these kind of draconian measures are taken to justify balance in the budget, in which such efforts are taken at the expense of students, at the expense of a lot of the more vulnerable in our city, and ultimately wind up costing us more than what we actually save. So I just wanted to make sure that we understood the time that we're in, and the question of tuition is a time that we've been in before.
I'm always frustrated because so many cities around the country work with their community colleges and the companies in a really cohesive manner, and I do believe that this mayor hasn't done that, and that's another way that we can strengthen CUNY and at the same time provide education, working with the business community and CUNY in a very proactive way.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Maureen French, and I attend John Jay College. And earlier today, I happened to see Mayor Giuliani speaking with a teacher, and it was a little bit contentious. He had stated that he would rather be taught by a good teacher in a large class than taught by a teacher who's concerned about class size. And I wanted to know each of your views on this matter and how you plan to champion education in New York City.
Well,
There's a nice short question.
I'd rather be taught by a good teacher in a small class size. You know, I don't know where he was coming from, and I understand that certainly he may have been trying to indicate the need for excellent teachers. There's no doubt that our public school system deserves the best in teaching that we can possibly afford. However, it is outrageous to believe that in the 21st century, children can learn in classroom sizes that range from over 40 to 50 young students in a classroom. We need and we can, in these modern days and times, make the accommodations to make sure that our educational system is the flagship. And until we do that, making these types of remarks does not solve the problem.
yeah, I would add to that and to tell Mayor Giuliani that the problem with the system not only is class size, but we don't pay our teachers enough compared to the suburbs. Because in the suburbs, in Nassau County, Suffolk County, and Westchester, starting salaries of teachers are 25 to 30% more, and the class sizes are smaller. So there's really no incentive for a teacher to start off teaching in New York City when they can get paid more and work in an environment with a smaller class size. So
I hear that argument all the time, and I'm always shocked by it. I think it makes my blood boil because I don't know what time they're talking about. I have children, adopted, foster care, lots of challenges, and I can tell you that in every single case, a small classroom and a quality teacher makes a difference. And I also tell you that many of the children have many issues at home, and that the small class size makes all the difference in the world. Then that teacher knows what the concerns are of the child, makes it personal, the child is able to get help. I have so many friends who are teachers. I must have 50 friends who are teachers right now, today, tonight. They're doing their lessons for tomorrow, and they will tell you that the class size makes all the difference in the world.
I guess the mayor, you know, has offered you a sort of self-serving, cynical argument. The preoccupation that we should have is how do we do the best for these children? And the facts are clear. Good teachers, smaller classrooms, well paid, you know, those are the kinds of ingredients that go into success. And, you know, when good teachers are forced into these large classes, they usually wind up in smaller classes in the suburbs.
Let me go to yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Lenny Spiller from Queens College, and on the onset, at the very beginning, you couched this entire discussion in that the city faces a big budget crisis, and that the mayor's actually called for 15%, you know, stop in everything this year to just close this year's budget gap, and we're talking about a $6 billion possibly budget gap next year. Yet we remain committed to education, health care, public housing. Is this optimistic? How's it going to happen? I'd just be interested in your thoughts on that.
well, it's a very difficult time. We really are in a similar situation to what we were in 1975. And I think what we have to do is bring the private sector and the labor movement together along with the public sector and all work together in the same direction to kind of share the burden. I think it's important that that cuts be not made arbitrarily, that that services are provided, and I think we can reach out to the private sector and try to get donations of computers. I come from the financial services industry. I was on Wall Street for 13 years, and the computer technology becomes obsolete after a year with most investment banking firms. and they can donate those computers to schools, and I think we can try to use supplement the resources of the school system by using some of that.
Maybe we can get Bloomberg boxes in all in all the schools. Yes, sir.
My name is Herbert Bush. I'm a CUNY BA student at John Jay College. It's been said that the Fresh Democracy Council has unified the Democratic Party, but I wonder if common interests, for example, affordable housing and CUNY funding, has been a result of the council.
Well, I would say that the Fresh Democracy Council is unifying with the fresh Democrats in the city council, fresh meaning new. And I think that we have not unified on issues per se, like CUNY and like housing or education. But I know that the dialogue that comes about through the bonding that goes on can only produce the kinds of results we want for CUNY and for affordable housing and for education.
As a matter of fact, I'd say that we're actually moving in that direction. I mean, there's so many different avenues. Just in a recent meeting, we were talking about looking at some of the issues, some of the preeminent issues, and trying to have some dialogue around them. So that's a natural manifestation of us coming together at this stage, recognizing the challenge that we have.
Except one of the things that was very interesting, and what Ms. Brewer just said, is that all the stuff that's going on in the city council now is about the rules and about the power and about the leadership, and that there is not agreement on a policy agenda. I mean, how are we going to rebuild the city? Are we going to rebuild Lower Manhattan? Are we going to spread it around to the rest of the city? How do you match? How do you preserve public services in the face of this budget trouble?
You know what is,
so does this rules discussion kind of mask the visions that are going to be coming
There are a
out?
couple of things happening. First of all, there are a lot of policy briefings going on. We had one recently at Citizens Union, discussion of rebuilding with persons who are expert in transportation infrastructure and housing infrastructure, and just after that, this kind of discussion took place. And that leads to more discussion. The speaker has had some briefings for council members, and always when you have a discussion of land use or budget, other topics come up. But what's interesting is that while that's going on, you still have had a more informal discussion about council policy with some of your colleagues.
Because all of that goes into the practical application of what you're going to be doing. Right. So I think it's, like I said, a natural manifestation. We're all concerned. And then when you have a colleague like an Alan Gerson, whose district is ground zero, it's inevitable that that sort of discussion will come about.
You know, as we sat here, you're talking about being bogged down. It's only 3 weeks that we're alive as a new council. It's interesting.
But it's only 4.5.
You're not alive as a new council anyway.
Right.
But only as a body,
but it's only 4.5 weeks. But it's only 4.5 weeks before you are sitting in those chairs on the second floor of City Hall.
Well, listen, that doesn't. The fact that folks have managed to sit down and talk and come to some agreement about a certain direction with regard to process doesn't mean that there's not going to be differences. You know, otherwise we'd be monolithic, and
that's right.
It wouldn't be that interesting. It's kind of nice to have a fight once in a while, a little argument once in a while. Otherwise, it's going to look like the speaker whipped us in line like the old days, and then people are going to wonder what kind of reform was that? Y'all don't even disagree on nothing. So I don't think what we're looking for is that kind of unity. I think what we're looking for is some common direction. There'll be differences, and ultimately, in the end of the process, there'll be votes taken. And if we don't get 51 people on the same vote, that's okay. We don't. Part of the reform is to allow people the opportunity not to vote in unity, to disagree, and not necessarily be punished. In the past, people would get a lead bill before them and get their arms broken if they didn't do the right thing. So,
or sometimes the wrong thing.
Whatever, But so that's, I think that there is an interest, especially in the wake of this mayoral election, to try to get the party to get more unified and recognize some of its problems, but its polarizing problems. But I think the legislative process has to have some kind of debate and some kind of differences. Otherwise, there's no growth.
I'm sure there'll be debate, but what I'm hoping is that we pick a few topics and issues that we want to work on together and accomplish them. And it's not just that we have 2 years politically, it's also that, at least in my feeling, my belief, my struggle for the last 30 years, is you have to accomplish something. People say, are you excited about being in office? I say, excited. When I accomplish something, then I will feel excited.
Yes, sir.
Shlomo Gunsberg, Queens College. You mentioned that the freshman Democratic meetings have resulted in a unified freshman Democratic caucus. Do you perceive any gap between the incoming freshman council members and the veterans
And the
in
13
dealing
holdovers.
with?
I think that there are slight differences.
The speaker vote will
Right.
determine
I
that.
think there. No. You know, just in having spoken with a number of the council members that are there, they too remember were a class that came in to a legislative body that was already established. They established a caucus among themselves as well, and have been able to really engineer some innovation into the body that brought new life to them as well. So I think it's only a natural manifestation of wanting to do more and to strengthen the legislative body, but only to say also that in some of the discussions that I've had with a number of the incumbents that will be coming back to the council, I think many of them, were they newcomers like I am, would probably be a part of the Fresh Democracy Council.
The other thing is just a numbers game. There are 38 new members out of 51. If you figure out the numbers, we're going to be significantly in the majority, whoever the leader is. And whoever the leader is, it'll be a whole new leadership, because you don't have an entrenched situation where you have somebody who was Speaker for 16 years and has solidified his power. Whoever the new leader of the council is, it'll be a much more open process just by virtue of 38 new members coming in and by virtue of term limits.
And so many coming in opposition to the county organizations. But look, the 38 new members are not monolithic.
That's
The
right.
13 of us are not monolithic. All of us in my class don't agree, don't want to necessarily always associate. And I know that in the freshman class, there are those who do not want to be a part of that kind of a caucus either. So, but that's natural, and,
That's right.
and there's nothing wrong with that. And you know, that doesn't mean that because there are these differences that the institution is going to be fractious, and that's the most important thing.
But it's also giving an opportunity when we go back to Manhattan. Queens doesn't have this opportunity because you're all new. But when we meet in Manhattan, Manhattan actually has quite a few returning members.
The most returning members.
Right, and so when we meet the fresh and the veterans,
The fresh and the not so fresh.
the fresh and the not so fresh, then we have.
Fresh and the stale.
No, I wouldn't say that, Bob Liff.
All I know is that some of them freshmen have been around for a long time.
That's right.
You're talking about
That, you know,
me.
some have 30 years seniority in other legislative bodies.
Let me go to this gentleman right here. Yes.
Good point.
Hi, my name is Randall Powell. I attend Hunter College, and I have a question with regards to the SEEK and TAP program, since they benefit so many minority students and so many students that are underprivileged that do get a chance to enter college. I was wondering if, when the new budget comes up, will you take into special consideration those students who do need these important programs to get into college? Will you make any adjustments to make sure that they do not really take any monies from these programs?
Well, for the most part, that's an area that the state legislature is going to have to deal with. I give you a person who's been very, very strong in that area. Assemblyman Ed Sullivan, who's the chairman of the Education Committee up in Albany. Assemblyman Steve Sanders, who's the chair of education. Ed Sullivan is higher education. And then there's another person that has been a real warrior on this subject, and that is Arthur Eve, the assemblyman from Buffalo. So that's just a place where you can really begin to get some support. In the city council, we've tried to recognize that within our limited role, there's some initiatives that we could take to support CUNY students, particularly those who manage to maintain a B average. There's a scholarship program that we've initiated that picks up half of the tuition if you maintain a B average. But that's our sort of SEEK and TAP kind of arrangement. But for the most part, what you're looking for is allies on the state level. And we're there with you in terms of our higher education committee, which has up to now been chaired by Helen Marshall.
Helen Marshall, who's now going to be
the borough president. And perhaps
Of Queens.
Borough President of Queens, another historic
But boroughs
moment.
are not significant in this discussion.
And neither is race, as the first black woman elected to the Borough President from Queens.
In dealing with the two sides of City Hall, it's kind of a corollary to a question we discussed. How important is this unity in a legislative branch, which is by definition has many heads and independently elected people? Mayor Giuliani spent a lot of energy trying to pick off city council members to avoid veto overrides, etc.
He did good,
and he did well in some cases. We don't know Mr. Bloomberg's skills as a
picker.
as a picker, but I mean, how conscious of that?
He's
are
not
you?
stingy though.
Well, he's not stingy in his own life. That doesn't mean he's not going to be stingy with tax dollars. To what degree, are you going to listen to Mayor Bloomberg if he comes to you and says, I need your help on this? How do you deal with these kinds of institutional questions? Your loyalty to the institution, but you want to do something.
Well, I think Yvette addressed it before, where we're all willing to give him a chance. Obviously, we're 47 Democrats out of 51. He was not our candidate for the most part.
Do you view him as a Democrat or Republican?
Oh, he used to be a Democrat, but I view him in his current election as a Republican. It's going to be interesting. He may end up turning around and becoming a Democrat before re-election time. That's not so far-fetched, since he's been a Democrat 58 out of his 59 years. If you want to count birth, I don't know if that counts.
But I think it's not just a Republican-Democratic issue. I think that
it's an institutional issue.
It is an institutional issue, and I think that the strength is going to be in the committees. I think that if you have an issue, I very much care, as I think we all do, about a safety net. I care about CUNY. I care about some of the programs that the public doesn't always relish. And so the question is, as a city council, and also OMB doesn't relish. I'll never forget being at City Hall for 4 years, and who runs the mayor's office, Office of Management and Budget, and the ratings issues, as you know from being on Wall Street.
Standard & Poor's and the rating agencies.
Correct. And so that's what you are always up against as a mayor. So the question is, as an institution and as a city council, how can you have the kind of public goodwill, the policies, the legislation, the outreach, the hearings, to be able to make a case for the folks, I think, who are most dependent on government. A good case, not handouts, but the self-sufficiency, all the arguments that we know. And that's what I would like to see this body be part of. We're also concerned about security and education and all the different aspects of our city.
Of life.
But we want to make sure that in this very difficult times that there's a voice and policy for people who most need it.
And not to be cynical, let me say, the mayor's job will be to pick off the council members. Not his primary job, but and he will have some success, I believe, by virtue of the fact that there will be projects or initiatives or other kinds of goodies that he has access to, that he will wave in front of members, and they will, for one reason or another, yield to that.
But that's the politics.
That's the politics of governing,
Right.
and part of that is also the politics of being a legislator that's trying to bring home some bacon to a constituency, and the challenge from the perspective of a speaker will be to try to make sure that the mayor does not raid the institution to such an extent that we can't move our agenda.
My timing masters are telling me that I have about 20 seconds to go. I want to thank you all for being here. I think that we're entering into a strange new world, both because of the term limits and because of the events of September 11th, which have changed us economically, changed us psychologically, changed the physical look out of the city.
The real Y2K.
And it's the real Y2K in a way. That's right. So I think these are four people. I'm sorry we didn't get to cover more issues than we could have. I want to thank you all for being here, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.